Okay, these are some problems from section 4.1, homework problems. And all you had to do is state the quadrant, so these are pretty easy. State the quadrant at this angle is, and these are in radians. So if I got 7 pi over 6, remember we talked about this before, the pi over 6s are like 30 degrees, and this is like pi over 6. Okay, this is 5 pi over 6, and this is 7 pi over 6, so you should be able to identify that after what we talked about in class as being in quadrant 3. 3 pi over 4, remember we talked about the pi over 4s, this was 1 pi over 4, 3, 5, and 7, they were real easy, so this is in the second quadrant, so that's pretty easy. Not a lot of work to these if you know what you're doing. Now we're going negative. Now this might be one where you might want to put it in degrees because the negatives might confuse you a little bit. You can think of it as negative 2 pi over 3. Now there's a couple ways to do it. First of all, I could think this would be negative pi over 3. And remember the pi over 3s were the ones that kind of hug the y-axis. So this is negative 1 pi over 3, and this is negative 2 pi over 3. So that would put me in quadrant 3. Or I can think of this as negative 2 times, and remember pi over 3 is like 60. So that would be negative 120, and again that's negative 90. There's negative 120, so that again would put me over here at quadrant number 3. So you can see that over there. Okay, the same idea, this is negative 5 pi over 4. We could put these in degrees if we want, or we could just go as we went for 5 over pi over 4. Each pi over 4 is what? 45 degrees. So here's 1 pi over 4, 2 pi over 4, 3 pi over 4, 4 pi over 4, and 5. So that's negative, so that puts me in quadrant 2. So that's one way to think about it, because each one of these is going to be, I'm going to go 5, negative in the negative direction. So again, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, or each one of those is 45 degrees, and you could think of it like that as negative 5 times 45 degrees, which is negative 225 degrees. And again, that's negative 180, negative 225 puts me over there in quadrant 2. So there's lots of ways to look at this. Now this one, we didn't go over, I kind of avoided this by just having you put it in degrees, but there's a little bit easier way we could do this. In other words, I could just think of this as 16 over 3 times pi. Now 3 goes into 16 5 and a third times, so that's the same thing as 5 and 1/3 pi. Now remember, all the way around the circle, now this is going in the positive direction, so all the way around the circle is how many radians? That's 2 pi. So if I go twice around there, there's 4 pi. So if I take this and if I subtract 4 pi, what's left? Well, 5 minus 4 is 1 and a third, so I've got 1 and 1/3 pi left. And that's the same thing as 4/3 pi. So this is a little bit easier way to think about it. Get it down to an angle that's less than 360. So what's 4/3 pi? Well, remember, this is 1/3 pi, 2/3 pi, that's 3/3 pi or 180, and this is 4/3 pi. Okay, 1/3 or pi over 3, 2 pi over 3, 3 pi over 3, and 4 pi over 3. Remember, that kind of hugs that line. So that's one way to look at it. So that puts us in quadrant 3. So we could say quadrant 3 that way. I'll write that over here. And another way to think of it is we could say this is 4 times pi over 3. And remember, pi over 3 is 60 degrees. What's 4 times 60? 240 degrees. And again, this is going to be 90, 180, 270, so 240 is right here. So again, that puts me in quadrant 3. So there's several ways to think about that. Kind of noodle it out. You won't have any trouble. Okay, now these are real easy. 120 degrees. So when it's in degrees, I'm going in this direction. This is 90 degrees. So another 30 is going to put me in quadrant 2. So that's pretty straightforward. Minus 210. There's minus 90. Minus 180. This would be minus 270. So I'm going to be right in here in quadrant 2. That's pretty easy. Remember, minus 90, minus 180, and minus another 30, so that puts me over here. Okay, now 420, this is another one where we might have to do a little bit of work, 420 degrees, and I want to take out the 360 all the way around. So I'm going to go all the way around once. If I take out the 360, what's left? 0, 12, 60 degrees. Okay, so 60 degrees puts me back in quadrant 1. So I'm going to go all the way around for 360, plus another 60 degrees to get to the 420, and that puts me in quadrant number 1. Okay, so those aren't too bad. You can kind of noodle those out and think about them. The book asks you to draw the angles. You don't have to draw the angles, but you should draw your little partial unit circle so you can kind of examine what's going on, and then draw this real fast. Now, I didn't label these. You don't really have to. This just kind of gives you a good reference for how you're going to noodle these things out. Okay? So if those help,